back in September for the Human Development and Leadership Division. So what I want to do is start by telling you a little bit more about me. I know Norval gave me a nice introduction, but I do like to start these out with maybe a little bit more personal information about me so that you kind of know a little bit more about my background. I actually relatively recently, or I still consider it recently, moved to Boston. So I'm a transplant from Virginia. Virginia is where I grew up and spent most of my life. I'm an active mentor. I actually do a fair amount of this on the side, helping people figure out what they want to do next in their career or tackle a specific leadership problem, any kind of number of different opportunities. On a more personal note, I also like to share some tidbits about me. I love to paint and work puzzles. The working puzzles probably helps people understand why I'm a consultant, why I enjoy it so much. Working with clients is like putting together puzzles. I'm also a huge hockey fan, which might have been a bit more challenging in Virginia, but is definitely not a challenge up here. Today we're actually going to go through LinkedIn, but before we get started, and I need to open up our poll. So bear with me just 1 second. So what I've done is I've opened up a poll for everybody with a couple of questions, and I'd like to get a feel for how many of you use LinkedIn, and if you're using LinkedIn, kind of do you consider yourself really a technical expert, or are you more on the informal level? Got about 60% of the people who've responded. It looks like the majority of you have accounts. That's good, because I wasn't necessarily going to teach you how to set up an account today. Okay. I think we've got most of the folks online who've responded. For those who've not had a chance to respond, that's okay. What it looks like is, as I expected, most of you have a LinkedIn account, which is great. So you're at least familiar to some extent with the application. And it looks like most of you are really in the category of being what I call an occasional user. You're in there, you're looking up things on occasion, but it's not something that you use as part of your daily business. So what I wanted to do today, and part of this was actually a request that came up in the Human Development and Leadership Division because people saw me doing a lot with this and they wanted to learn more. And what I have found is that LinkedIn, for those of you who've been using it for a while, and I've been using it for probably about 10 years now, really kind of started, I would say, as a very basic networking platform and more of an online resume contact database, kind of moved into what I called an online Rolodex phase where I knew I could always go there and find certain contacts and connections. But really in the last 4 or 5 years, what we have seen is a shift in LinkedIn's use and purpose from not just being a place to keep connections and contacts and people you've met, but also to share knowledge, to gather information, and to really actually do a new form of online networking instead of the more traditional face-to-face networking. And when you look at LinkedIn, LinkedIn really is used around the world. Now, granted, I would admit that and believe that the majority of the LinkedIn users are, as the graphics indicate, based in the U.S. However, there are growing presence of LinkedIn users around the world, and some of which are gaining very rapidly. I know I get a lot of new networking requests coming from India and China as people are moving into our particular industry and looking for help. So I get people reaching out from those areas of the world. So it's a great way to not only meet people in the physical area that you live, but also around the world. So what I wanted to talk about today is a couple of key topics, and as I shared with Norval, what I'd like to do is open things up from a standpoint of if you've got questions as we're going through this, go ahead and use your chat box and type those in so that we can keep record of those. We'll try and get to and answer as many of those as we can, but what I'm going to really do is I'm going to jump out of my presentation here in a minute, and we're going to go into LinkedIn, and I'm going to show you how I actually use this system and how to do some of these things. The couple key topics that we're going to look at are looking at learning and sharing information. So how do you find relevant groups? What is this following people? What does that really mean? For some of you, you might be interested in sharing your own thoughts. So we'll talk a little bit about their publishing platform. Also talk a little bit about reflecting your personal brand, really as it relates to networking. So we'll touch on profile maintenance, and we'll touch on connection invitations. And then we'll also talk about how you build that network and how you connect with people. And then the last piece I want to touch on is something that I call muting the noise. For anybody who's on any social media platform, whether it's LinkedIn, which is professional networking, Facebook, or others, we get a lot of information really fast, and LinkedIn is no exception. However, the LinkedIn creators have given us some tools within their platform to help as they've made this transition from really a connection database to a knowledge and information sharing center to be able to really mute that noise and start to focus in on really what we want to see and what we want to hear. Okay, so with that, we're going to go ahead and move into LinkedIn. And as you can see, being a consultant, as Norval mentioned, I'm in LinkedIn pretty frequently. I am a daily user. I probably am in there 6 out of 7 days of the week. Even on Saturdays or Sundays, I'm in there checking on various features and things like that. So I tend to simplify across all my devices and try and stay logged in. But for any of you, if you've been in the system, this is really where you land, right? So when you land in LinkedIn, what you'll see over here is your quick profile dashboard. You'll see what I'll refer to as your news feed here in the center, and you'll see a menu bar up here at the top. And I want to start a little bit with talking about your profile. And really for me, as I have looked at this and I have worked on my profile, what I really emphasize for people when they ask me, well, what should I do with my profile? I turn around and ask them, my first question back is, well, what do you want to get out of this? Writing a profile to help you get a job is different than writing a profile to build network connections and to build contacts. So understanding how you want to use LinkedIn is probably the first place that I would recommend everybody starts and reevaluates. Many people haven't necessarily taken advantage of looking at all of the features, for example, here in your profile description to be able to actually customize information about you. So one of the things that I talked about is making your profile reflect your personal brand. Well, who are you? What is it about you that people might want to know? And that, of course, will be different based on the audience you're trying to reach. I personally customize just about everything. So everything from this little title here, LinkedIn defaults to this being your current present job description. However, you'll see these little pencils appear all over the place in LinkedIn where you, as your profile user, have the ability to edit things. When you click on that, you actually have the ability to change that. and override it with a new headline. And because I tend to use mine for professional networking within my industry, I tend to include, I'm a consultant and I specialize in quality systems and regulatory compliance. But I've had, especially with some of the leadership folks that I work with, they come up with way more creative titles and put in things like leadership guru, entrepreneur, just some sort of descriptor that moves away from, it being really, this is my position and this is the company I work for. You also, when you edit your profile, you have your ability to add and edit your summary, and I really emphasize personalizing this piece. Talk about what you're passionate about, talk about people you're looking to connect with. If you're looking for a job, sell your skills, highlight those key things that they may or may not see, right? Because when people go look at who you are, this is the representation online of who you are. The other thing that people don't always know exists or utilize is this section down here that talks about media. So in certain industries and in certain capabilities, you may want to link to your own website, you may want to upload documents, or maybe if you're a job hunter, you want to upload a copy of your resume. You've got the capability here to both link to other websites as well as to upload particular documents. And as you can see, I have one that's actually uploaded. And as you look at this information, what it does is it helps give people an orientation to who you are and what you do. And in my case, because I'm about, really for me, LinkedIn is about building networks, building connections, sharing information. I list my specialties and my areas of expertise, and then you can see how that media translates into the profile page. So this is probably one of those pieces that I recommend people focusing on when they look at their profile, especially if you want to use this for networking. When I get connection requests from people that don't have a lot of information in their profile, I don't know how to know who they are or what their expertise with and whether or not maybe I should connect with them. So again, this is one of those items that I'd strongly recommend you reflect who you are and how you want to be seen by others. So hopefully you've got that piece down. You've got your profile there. Another thing that people look at is looking at building their network and connections. And there are a lot of actual different ways to add connections, right? So you can actually go in and look for a person. And I'm actually going to, I don't remember if my mom is in here or not, but oh, she is, and I'm already connected to her. Let me see if I can find somebody else. Anyways, I'm just going to use Wanda as an example. So I actually know several Wandas. Wanda Arnold is somebody that I do know from my time living in Richmond. However, she and I are not directly connected on LinkedIn. So when I go in and search for a person, which is one of those many things you can do, you can search by name and you can get a list of people that actually comes back at you. I can actually go look at her profile. I can see more information about her, and if I want to, I can actually send in a connection request to her right here and there from her profile. Now, in other cases, and I actually think I do know, so here's how something would appear. So I just actually had my very first phone call with Andrea the other day. She and I are talking related to some ASQ, Human Development and Leadership Division business, but I don't know her. And I don't actually have a first-degree connection that knows her. So you'll see that my appearance or her profile appears very differently for me than Wanda's profile appeared. And in that case, what this really means is that the only thing I can do is send her what InMail refers to as an InMail, which is their internal email. And if she's open to it, then she can, in return, reply and establish those connections. But LinkedIn is built on building those networks through your known connections, so it's not going to allow you to connect with just anybody and everybody that's out there. As you look at things from your people is obviously one piece. You can always, for most of you, you may know that you can actually get to your connections by going back to your network. For example, I've got a number a number of things. Somebody obviously on the webinar, and thank you, Joe, for doing that. It just sent me a connection request. So those pop in real time, and I can just send this. But I want to point out actually what Joe did when he did this. He actually included a note when he sent me that connection request so that I knew a little bit more about him, which is fantastic. It's actually a practice that I like to do in many cases. If you do what are called these quick connects, which down here LinkedIn likes to make lots of recommendations on people you might know, it doesn't allow you to actually personalize the invitation. And I am a huge fan of personalizing these invitations because it lets the person who's receiving it know about why you might be connecting with them. If it's somebody you know very well, maybe you don't need to include that note, but if you just met them at a conference, just met them at a section meeting, maybe you don't even really know them, but you have something in common based on looking at their profile and you want to build a relationship, it allows you to put that explanation in there. So those are important, especially if you're going to move into very active networking. Personalizing that invitation is extremely important. So I've talked a little bit about the basics, at least as I consider them the basics, about customizing your profile, really making it about you and supporting your usage of LinkedIn. Talked a little bit about those connection pieces. But what I really want to do from here on out is talk about how you learn and share and how you find information. This is something that I would probably say I didn't start doing very actively until I became a consultant. When I was working in industry, I probably went on LinkedIn maybe once a month, if not once every couple months. It was still for me very much like an online Rolodex. I wasn't using it to its fullest capacity. What I have found is the more I use it, the better it gets in terms of being customized to what I see. And I spend a lot of time in the morning. You know, one of my first thing in the morning activities is I go into LinkedIn and I kind of scroll through my news feed looking for news articles and things like that that might be of interest for me. And my news feed is built on several different features, as is everybody's, part of which is companies that you follow. So for instance, I follow ASQ, which for those of you who are members, if you're not following ASQ, I highly recommend it. It's a great way to get news and information about the organization directly in your feed. But you can actually look for ASQ and you'll find their company page and all kinds of information about them there. There are also, so these first two happen to be companies. In this case, this is actually showing in my news feed because somebody in my network, my direct connection, liked it. It may or may not be of interest to me. And you'll notice that for these types of posts, there's these three little dots that appear, which seem to be a current design feature in many software applications. And when you click on those, you get a number of options that actually come up. You can actually copy the link to your own post. You can hide the post. You can choose to unfollow the person you're connected with so that their news and information does not appear in the feed. And then you've also got an option to report the post. And I encourage people not to click this unless you really intend to do this, because this is really intended to report posts to LinkedIn that are violations of the LinkedIn usage policy. But for instance, if I'm not really interested in Amazon UK and some of those pieces, I can actually click hide the post. It hides it from my feed and I won't see that post again, right? The other kind of source of information that appears in your news feed is not just the company information, but also from individuals. So being a huge fan of leadership, and I'm an avid reader of just about probably every leadership book that I can get my hands on, I have also found that many of the people that I admire, someone like Richard Branson, who's very innovative with his company, very passionate about who he is as a leader and how he leads people, I actually went and found him on LinkedIn and then did what LinkedIn calls follow. So when you follow a person like Richard Branson, what it means is when he posts articles or shares information, it shows up on your news feed as well. And for me, I follow predominantly two categories of people. I follow leaders and influencers in leadership and management, and then I also follow a number of pharmaceutical executives or other consultants or other industry experts within the pharmaceutical and biotech medical device industry, so that as I look at my feed when I'm getting posts, it's typically one of two flavors. It's either from a leadership expert and a topic of leadership, or it's something that is specific to pharma, biotech, and medical device. And for me, part of the reason I make this a daily activity is I like to see what are the current topics, what are people talking about, what becomes important to them. So I get everything from science developments to summaries on pharmaceutical companies, etc. So understanding how that feed works is important because then you can actually go in and you can use this very simple, powerful search engine to actually look for somebody or some topic. So as an example, and I'll show you an example of one that I was doing earlier this week. I actually did a search for a GCP auditor because I needed to find somebody who actually could audit and help me with some GCP audits for a client. And I don't know many people in the GCP space, so my inherent reaction is go to LinkedIn and see what I can find. Well, for me, I'm not interested in jobs, and when you type in your search term, and it can be a person's name or it can be literally any kind of keywords, you'll get all results. Well, I'll be honest, I'm not looking for a GCP job, so I don't want to see this. So let me narrow this to people who are GCP auditors, right? And then I can start to look and I can start to reach out to people and maybe build some connections in that space. So that's a way that you can actually find people that maybe you don't know, but maybe you're looking for a certain expertise, and LinkedIn is very powerful at helping you find those options and opportunities. Another way to find experts is to use what LinkedIn refers to as groups. You will also see groups returned in my search results, but for most of us, when we want to look at groups, we actually come over here and click on the work launchpad, and it'll pop up a number of options. And the option that for groups you want to look for is groups. And it'll pop open your LinkedIn groups area. And it typically will do this on a new web page so you don't actually lose where you were in your original LinkedIn. And as you can see, the groups landing page has changed over time and actually provides us with a quick summary now of all the groups I'm a member of, recent posts that have been put into those groups. Groups are valuable, especially in my area. We've got a lot of different types of groups that are out there, and a lot of folks either providing research information or asking questions and looking for advice. These are very helpful in terms of trying to get that additional information and making those additional connections. In any group's case, when you actually look at a particular group, so in this case this is medical device quality assurance, I'm an active member, but if I wasn't, it would actually show me a request to join or a join button that would allow me to join the group. And joining a group doesn't necessarily mean that you have to contribute and interact, but what it does mean is that you'll be able to see and select email frequencies of posts. You'll be able to get their posts on that main group page that we were just looking at, and really be able to really judge for yourself whether or not it's a group that you're going to find interesting and valuable for you. For me in particular, this is a group that provides various market information in the medical device field, and is something that that I use as a group more to read information from than to ask questions to. When you're in the group area, you can also look at your groups from a standpoint of all the groups that you're in. So I'm a member of, I think I actually, at last count, had maxed out the number of groups, and LinkedIn had told me I couldn't join anymore. A number of different groups. The ASQ Global Voice Equality, so you can not only follow ASQ as a company, but they also have a group. And I believe that Norval mentioned that the Blue Ridge section has one. I know the Human Development and Leadership Division has one. So many areas within ASQ have groups that you can join and talk and interact with other members. The central ASQ group that's run by headquarters is actually great in trying to prompt conversation and dialogue, but you'll see that there's also people sharing information of varying topics that may be relevant to quality professionals around the world. But I encourage you to explore the groups. It's a great way to build the dynamic in looking at getting information, obtaining information, asking questions, trying to get some answers. Some of the FDA groups that I belong to for my industry, I'm going to actually see if I can find one that's not a news network. Believe this one. Nope. I apologize for that. So you even see Six Sigma groups in here. You'll see inspectional groups. So for me, somebody's asked a question, they're looking for somebody to answer, and it actually is a very recent question. So they're asking a particular question. I can go in if I would like and comment on this and start a dialogue. In many cases when I've done this, sometimes eventually you connect directly with the person you're having a conversation with. In other cases, it's just something that happens within the groups. But this is a great forum when you're stuck on interpretation of something or you have a question, don't know how to handle a situation. I'm almost willing to bet there's a LinkedIn group out there that can actually help you with determining how to best approach your situation or provide you with some expertise. Now, the downside about groups is that currently group conversations do not appear in your news feed. So if we go back to my main LinkedIn page and my news feed, we don't see group conversations here. However, I just got an email from LinkedIn literally yesterday that indicated they are working on rolling out that functionality, and that will come. So now you don't have to go to a separate space to actually keep track of group conversations. They're going to integrate those into the main news feed as well. So you can see those questions real time. The other option that I have been using for groups and managing some of those conversations and staying abreast of the conversations and topics is using email summaries. So in my profile settings, when I come over here and I actually look at my specific profile settings, I have a lot of options in here, but one of which is communication preferences. So I can actually set my email frequency preferences, how to handle group invitations and notifications. You can get them as frequently as you want from the moment they're posted to everything to weekly or monthly updates. So again, you can get this information pushed to you at a frequency in which you want to see it. In terms of looking at sharing information, so the group dynamic and the group interactions is a great way to share information. But another way that you can share information is actually to publish on LinkedIn as well. And I think many of us from basic social media understand that we can share a quick thought or idea by typing in this box that's located right at the top of our feed. We can type a comment in here, we can paste a link to an article that we found interesting, and we can hit post and it'll actually post. But for some folks, we might have some thoughts that are maybe a bit more than might realistically fit into that box very well. And so LinkedIn a few years back actually implemented a feature called publishing. and I'll talk about that here in a moment. I actually just saw a question come through. Um, so we have somebody on the group that is a leader for their section's LinkedIn group. And she was asking that when she posts, the post actually shows that it's from her. And is there any way to show that the post is from the section? Or she's asking, should I create a company and then post as a company? So I'm going to show you guys what she's talking about. And I need to move the chat box here momentarily. So if I go back to my groups, so apparently this woman is like I am. She manages a group. I help manage the Human Development and Leadership Division. So what she's asking is when she actually goes in, she actually gets the same box that everybody gets, start a conversation with your group, and you actually end up, you title it and you put the information in here. But when she does this on behalf of the section, like I do this on behalf of the division, it shows that you're the one who's posted it. As far as the groups go, there is no way to change that. It's always going to link to your personal account, which is why I have recommended for some groups, when you're working in things like an ASQ section or maybe working with a different professional society, that if you've got the means to actually set up a company page, when you actually use that company page and post to it, it'll actually post as the actual, in our case, it's ASQ Human Development and Leadership Division and not who actually posted it. So the way members would see that is they actually see it this way. So it only posts the actual company page name and not the individual who posted it. So hopefully that answers your question. But both of those tools are available if you're interested in sharing information, especially on behalf of a professional society. You've got both of those capabilities. I also got another interesting question before I move back in to talk about publishing that asked, is there a rating system within LinkedIn that better promote those who participate more? And the bottom line answer to that question is yes. So there are what LinkedIn refers to as influencers. So people like Richard Branson, so I pulled up his profile and I follow him, all right? I'm not connected to him. He is actually what we call an influencer in LinkedIn. So people who are extremely active on LinkedIn, and the LinkedIn folks at LinkedIn have a lot of data and statistics behind this. They can tell who's posting and how many views posts are getting. They can ask these people to be what they call LinkedIn influencers, and those people, their posts are much more visible in the systems than others. In terms of individuals like me, there isn't necessarily any individualized rating that actually happens within the system. And one follow-up question on the company discussion, she found that very helpful, and then she just asked, did the post from the companies also show up in the news feed? And yes, they do. So if you're the owner of a news feed or the owner of a company page like an ASQ, Human Development and Leadership Division, and unfortunately, I think I'm going to have to scroll too far down to find one. When you post to it, it will actually show in your news feed so that you can then further share it with other people. Let me go back and also talk about publishing because we've got about 15 minutes left, and I want to talk a little bit about publishing as well, because for those of you who may not be actively leading professional societies or have the need to create your own group or create your own company page, there is another way that you can share information. And it's something that I have really only been working with for maybe the past year, but find it extremely valuable. And it's actually their publishing platform. And the way that you can get to that is by clicking on this Write an Article button up here at the top of your news feed. What it'll do is it launches their publishing platform, and it's a simplistic, you're not going to have advanced formatting capabilities here, but a simplistic writing tool that actually allows you to craft longer thoughts or maybe short articles on a very particular topic and post them here. And you can also see in my case, I've got probably about 6 or 7 different articles that are posted on my profile. One of which, everything from a conference summary. I did this last year when I went to a conference. I came back and I wrote up this nice long summary that obviously was too long for that little post box that's on my main news feed. The other types of articles I've written some opinion pieces. So this, I wrote Pharma's Future, the Road Ahead. I published that in January, shortly after our president was inaugurated. I looked at aftermath of bad customer experience, what happens next. This I wrote kind of in the wake of all of those airplane issues where they were being widely touted across social media, and customer service was being called into question, those kinds of things. So it's a nice forum that means that someone like me does not have to invest in a separate blogging platform to write these little short, thought-provoking pieces that people can look for and find and view and read, right? And the process is really pretty simple. It provides you with some plain text. It allows you to do some bulleting. And in some of them, I'll show you a different one from a standpoint of options. You can also embed video snippets, quotes. So you do have a little bit of capabilities from a standpoint of for longer articles and things like that. But it's a way for you to share thoughts and opinions. And it's something that for some of my colleagues in the Human Development and Leadership Division, when they attended this webinar and learned about this, all of a sudden I started to see them starting to use this. They really like the platform from a standpoint of its simplicity and central nature to everything else that they're doing. I got another question that asked, how do I see what companies I'm following? Can I see the groups I'm following? So it looks like he's got fundamentally a question about, can he see the companies he's following versus the groups that he's following? So that answer is yes. So I'll go into that. But I would encourage you guys, before I leave the publishing space, to make sure that you check this out. It is a great way to share information. And for those of you who are involved in ASQ actively, it's a great way to put some thought-provoking pieces out there that maybe you share within your group discussions, those kinds of things. When you go back to your LinkedIn feed, when you publish an article, again, anything you publish will show up in your news feed as well. You can also get to your articles that you've published by going back to your profile. And you'll actually see down here, you'll see your articles that are here. You'll also see all of your activities and posts that you've made. But part of the reason I wanted to come back to your profile is that if you keep scrolling down your profile, and depending on how long yours is, this may take a minute, you'll actually see a couple of additional sections that are down here. So to answer the question about the companies that I'm following and can I see what I'm following, down here in your interests, these are all of the various companies. I can look at the influencers I'm following. You can look at companies that you're following. You can look at groups that you're a member of. And in my case, I also have my schools that I've been associated with, which of course I think Norval mentioned at the beginning is Virginia Tech, but I am also a Johns Hopkins graduate as well for my master's program. So you can get to those if you want to see and maybe check. I also encourage people to periodically go through and clean those up, because maybe you don't have something that's overly relevant in your profile anymore. Another question, which is a great question, I get this a number of times, is about premium membership and really what are the advantages. So somebody obviously knows that this exists, and in looking at my profile, you can see that I'm a premium member. For most people, I would argue that a premium membership is not worth the expense. So a premium membership is usually going to run you a couple $100s a year. So there is a cost that's associated with it. The benefits that come with that are things like an increased allowance in LinkedIn in mail, so I can send more of those than an average user would. I can also view a lot of statistics about my information and my posts. And when I go to companies, and I'll show you this, another insight that LinkedIn will give me that's a premium feature is some insights about the company. So in this case, I just happened to go back to ASQ because it was quick and simple, but most users aren't going to see these types of pieces of information because they're available only to premium members. So I would say for most folks, premium membership is not a huge advantage. Me being a consultant, I like being able to say, okay, well, I want to look at Novartis as a company and a potential client. And as a premium member, I can kind of see some basics that are based on the LinkedIn data. They're not necessarily based on generic, publicly available information. But I can see how many of their employees, how many employees they have. I can see what the distribution of those is. I can look at what their hiring patterns are. I can see alumni. And if they had job openings, those would be posted there as well. So there are some definite benefits, but not necessarily for the majority of people. So I would consider it very carefully if it's something you've been thinking about, making sure that you really think you're going to get the benefit out of those features that are there. Like I said, for most folks, I would say that it's not necessary. So hopefully that answers that question. So we've talked about looking at your profile from a brand perspective and making sure that it actually represents who you are, really, so that if you're searching for a job or you're like me and you actively want to network, you're going to get and attract the kind of attention that you want. We talked about learning and sharing, finding relevant groups, following people, how to see who all you're following, interacting of that information with your news feeds. We talked about connecting with people. We talked a little bit about personalizing those connections, and that for me is something that is extremely important. I want to talk a little bit briefly and talk about a concept that has come into play as the advent of LinkedIn is here, which is really a concept called open networking. And it's something that you'll see for me, if I go into my network, you'll see I get a lot of invitations from a lot of folks. Frankly, some of them, many of them, if you look down here, are actually recruiters. Some of them are great and they send me a personalized invitation to which I often reply. In other cases, they're just clicking connect. And I'm very cautious, my personal experience, about connecting with recruiters, because once they're connected with me, they can now typically see a lot of information and they see who I'm connected with and those kinds of things. But all of that information is available here about your network. The other thing that I like about LinkedIn, and this is important, especially if you're like me and you're both on a desktop and a mobile device. All right, I don't think many of us go anywhere without a cell phone nowadays, is the platform is seamless from a standpoint of the stuff you do on the desktop is also appearing on your platform. So for many of my connections, the primary way I now get in touch with them is actually through LinkedIn, because I'm never 100% sure if I've got the right email address or maybe the phone number is current. And with so many of us now in smartphone world, it's really easy to use this as a platform to send those quick messages back and forth. So that's also a way that you can network and chat with people as well. And then I want to reemphasize and circle back to the muting the noise, because we've got about 4 or 5 minutes left, and I want to answer any additional questions that you guys have. I really do encourage you guys to take advantage of these 3 little dots that are up here. Most of the people that I talk to that get frustrated with social media, it's because they're getting a lot of what I call unwanted noise in their social media feeds, because it's just coming in through mechanisms that is not related to something that they're really interested in. And this hide the post feature is really going to be a really great friend for you as you use LinkedIn on a more routine basis. If you do get to a point where maybe you followed a company and you decide that maybe their posts aren't relevant, you can actually use those same three dots to actually also turn around and unfollow them. The same thing applies to people. You can unfollow them directly from a post and not actually have to do multiple clicks. So that's definitely a feature that if you're not using, I would strongly encourage you guys to use. And I did have one more slide that I did want to share with you guys just really quickly from a standpoint of some other tips, just kind of some general guidelines that I typically follow as I'm using LinkedIn. First and foremost, keep it professional. We are what we represent, and it's much more difficult when we're talking virtually and we may never have a face-to-face or a phone conversation with someone. All of those posts and those messages and things like that, they leave an impression and they form an impression in somebody else's head. So keep your personal brand in mind. Understand how you want to be portrayed and how you want to be seen by others. I encourage people to leave the family pics for other platforms, Facebook, Instagram, other personal social media platforms. You might chuckle at the never use it as a dating site. I reported somebody because that's what they were doing, and that is clearly a violation of LinkedIn's usage policies. I also encourage people, opinions and diversity of thought are great. I actually love it. But make sure if you're getting into a significant disagreement, you might want to take the discussion offline and then resolve that in that particular way. I also avoid overposting or sharing information. Most of us can't process but so much information. I like to set a routine. Like I said, I typically do this in the morning. Sometimes I'll go back in the evenings. And that's where I may share a couple of things that I saw as I was reading through my news features of the day, et cetera, and share and talk about those. And the other thing is, don't be afraid to change or update your profile as your career evolves. If I look at my experience in the industry, my career has taken several turns. So for me, it's important that you keep your profile current with what you need. If you're in an active job search and that's what you're about, then make sure your LinkedIn profile supports that. If you've now got a job and you're happy in it, make sure you update your LinkedIn profile so that people don't keep talking to you about other potential jobs and opportunities. So those are some other tips that I highly recommend. I'll stay on for another couple minutes to take any more questions as well, but I do want to thank everybody for attending. I hope you got something out of this, even if you are a heavy LinkedIn user. If you've got questions specifically about something you saw or maybe a feature you want more detailed information about, feel free to reach out to me. You can certainly connect with me through LinkedIn, or I've provided my personal email address as well. And also keep tabs on the Blue Ridge section webinars, which I'm sure many of you are. They've got some great topics coming up and have had some great topics in the past, and I really am supportive of this kind of venue, so do keep that up. So with that, I'll open up the floor to take any other last questions that you guys might have, and then I'll turn things over here shortly back to Norval. All right. Well, I don't see anything else coming in, so I'm going to turn things back over and let him close out. Well, actually, it looks like that may not have worked, so feel free to drop off. I've kept note of the chat. It looks like there aren't any other major questions in there. If I do see any that pop through, I will reach out to you guys, work with Norval to get you some answers. All right? Thanks, everybody, for coming.